Good afternoon. So I think if you want to see all the things that Erin pointed out and what not to do, watch the following presentation. All right, so I'm Lance Sherry. I'm a professor of system engineering at George Mason University. I previously spent a career in the aviation industry, working for Fortune 100 companies, ran FinTech, and a couple of startups. So this is some work that we've been working on for about 8 years now, and it initiated when I was at a weather conference, and I went to the wrong room, and there was a meteorologist talking about contrails. And that's how I first learned about this, and we've been pursuing knowledge and science in this area for, like I said, the last 8 years. So we have this opportunity to reduce the Earth's total global warming by 2%. So with a little idea, we can have big impact to reduce global warming by up to 2%. And the idea behind it is something that we call a Contrail market exchange. So that's an eBay where sellers of carbon offsets can post their carbon offsets. These are verified, and then people who want to purchase carbon offsets can purchase it from this Contrail market exchange. All right, so let me give you a little bit of background. I know you're not supposed to talk about background with finances, but a little bit of background about contrails. So these are these thin white clouds that you see in the blue sky. They're generated by the soot and water vapor that's emitted from jet engines. And under very specific atmospheric conditions, high humidity and cold temperatures, the soot and the water vapor crystallize to form ice crystals. And that's how the contrails are. So under certain conditions, they can last up to 10 hours. Now the reason why they're bad for the climate is they reflect back to Earth, and technically they absorb the outgoing thermal radiation. So the solar radiation comes in and heats up the planet. The planet then releases thermal radiation. Normally that thermal radiation would go out into space and it have a cooling effect. Because of the contrails absorb it, and that results in an increase in the Earth's temperature structure. So 33% of outgoing thermal radiation is absorbed by these contrails. So the International Panel of Climate Change has done several studies, and the consensus is that the contrails now contribute 2% of the world's total global warming. So we've all kind of been trained by the media to think of greenhouse gases as the culprit, and they are 98%. But this 2% is the opportunity that we have as a result of the contrails. So just a little bit of more technical information. We conducted a long study published in 2020 where we looked at all the ways you could eliminate or mitigate contrails. And the chart on the left-hand side shows utility versus cost. And the thing to take away from that, in the upper left-hand corner, the highest utility and the lowest cost is something called navigational avoidance. And that's shown on the right-hand side. The simple idea is that if you know where the ice supersaturated region is, the relative humidity temperature, it turns out to be a thin band, a couple thousand feet in vertical depth. You can either fly over it or fly under it. So without any technology, without any regulations, airlines could, if they wanted to, aircraft operators could, if they wanted to, if they knew where these ice supersaturated regions were, either fly over or under them. And in that way, they could create a contrail offset. All right, so just a few more small points. It's only about 5 to 10% of flights actually create contrails each day. There's really no fuel penalty because the fuel it takes to climb a little higher, you gain back by being at a higher altitude, low density. So it's pretty much a wash in terms of the cost. All right, so then the question is, why don't airlines do it? Well, airlines are businesses. Business jet owners also are businesses. And so they need an incentive. And that's the idea behind this Contrail market exchange. So as I said, the market exchange is like eBay. If you have a contrail that you'd like to sell, or the avoidance of a contrail you'd like to sell, you post it on this market exchange, and the people that want to buy offsets can purchase them from the exchange. So one of the things that we would argue is that these offsets are high quality offsets, because you can look up in the sky and you can see that that aircraft passing over did not generate a contrail. Whereas whereas if you purchase Amazon forest, you don't know where the forest is, you don't know the status of the forest, and you don't know how much CO2 has been removed. All right, so I'm an engineer, and there's a lot of technical details, which I'll skip because this is a pitch. But there are 5 functional components that you need in order to do this, and this is the secret sauce, and these are the things that we've developed. Just very quickly, the first one is the Contrail forecaster. So you've got to be able to take weather information and flight plan information and predict whether or not the contrail will be full. And then there's a negotiation with the operator to decide whether to fly over or under. And then the second thing is you want to verify, either through satellite images or ground-based sky images, whether the contrail took place or not. And so we have sophisticated technology with air flight tracking and computer vision of images to track the presence or absence of contrails. The third thing is to calculate the CO2 equivalent. So the contrail has a reduced radiator forcing, so we've got to convert that into a CO2 equivalent. And there's some theory behind that. Now all of that gets put in a ledger that's run by the United Nations, and then it goes into this marketplace where you can buy and sell. All right, so George Mason owns a patent on this. Obviously, for a business, a patent is nice to have, but the most important thing is to get to market ASAP. So the value proposition is primarily for business jet owners. We think that's our first market because they're flexible, and mostly privately owned, and so they can make quick business decisions to go with something like this. The idea is that they could monetize their actions that they take to eliminate contrails. So the other customers would be airlines, and that's obviously a longer selling cycle, and would require a little bit different strategy to begin with. Like I said, the buyers would purchase these because they're high quality carbon offsets, and the regulators, it's a win-win for them. They don't have to get into creating regulations. So we've done extensive customer surveys, kind of in a lean startup fashion. We talked to all range of manner of business jet owners, fractional jet owners, and there is significant interest if we can get our beta version up and running, and then running pilot projects and then actually purchasing the service. So the airlines are very interested in this. There is a group that's called the Airline Contrail Impact Task Force that meets, and that's 12 US and international airlines. And there's just a meeting a couple of weeks ago in Washington, D.C. And then one of the other things to note is that Bill Gates in the Gates Ventures has invested in this approach as well. All right, so there's a big opportunity to generate significant revenue for each 50 nautical mile. For each 50 nautical mile contrail, there's about $150. There's a little bit of complexity behind how that number is calculated because there's different ways of calculating CO2 impact. So there's the GTP and the GWP. So a little bit of details, but there's a range in which the CO2 would be generated. The most important thing is that with eliminating contrails, this would generate equivalent 1% of U.S. airlines' domestic revenue. So it's a significantly large number. And I think with that, we're kind of seeking $750K seed round. We've raised $100K so far. That money would be applied to staffing up for the software development and testing. And then we need a CEO to handle marketing, legal, finances, and go out and pitch this product to any company. So we've got a very strong advisory board, including Terry Thompson from SP Global. Skip West is a well-known entrepreneur in this region, and several other people that have experience in the industry and or in IP. And so with that, we think that this is a great opportunity and to take a small idea and to have a big impact. Thank you.